Hey everybody, this is a quick video to go over the instructions for your open letter writing project. So if you don't know what an open letter is, it's pretty cool. You'll get the idea like reading the examples that I posted for you to read. But definitely look it up. Like if you're curious about this, Google it. It's an interesting format. So open letters historically have been a piece of writing that are published publicly. So this would be like on somebody's blog or like used to in a newspaper, or like this would be published widely for like the general public or kind of like a broad audience. However, the addressee, so like a letter has a beginning and an end, right? So dear so and so, blah 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 blah, love mom or whatever. So this open letters are addressed to somebody kind of specific, so like either one person or a small group of people, but they're meant to be read more broadly, and it helps you kind of set up this persuasive tone. It's just a cool format, so you'll get it as you read through the examples. It's a way to push for change. It's a way to point out problems. It's a way to like call attention to stuff, advocate, criticize, whatever. It's a way to share your perspective, so like your take on something that's happening. And perspective is really important in these. So perspective, thinking about like what you can see from where you are. So literally like what you're looking out onto. So there are these, we have endless large social issues that cause large scale problems and all of that. I'm not going to ask you to take on some big, broad social issue, quite the opposite, actually. Your goal here is going to be to really think about your own experience and your own observations and your own perspective and what you can share about a topic based on your unique position, like based on your unique point of view, like as a point in space. Okay. So this is going to bring in some level of like your experience and your voice, and you're going to use examples and all sorts of good stuff. We'll get to that here in a minute. So yeah, your personal experience. So this is not a good option to ask chat about or to use AI for, because here's the thing with AI, it does not have a perspective. I will tell you, I absolutely used AI to help me put this instruction sheet together. Because that's one thing it's really good at, is like organizing and keeping things in order and like, just making sure stuff's clear. It's great for that. However, it has no perspective, right? So it's good at helping me figure out how to set these instructions up so that they're clear and useful to you, but it's not good at having a take, because it can't. It doesn't have a point of view. It doesn't have a point in space that it occupies. You could tell it, take the point of view of someone who, has this or that political leaning, but it is never going to be able to see the nuance and complexity and like the interesting stuff about the topic that you can see from like exactly where you are in space. So don't use AI for this one, even for brainstorming. Like, this should be something not that necessarily comes easily to you, but it should be something that you get a little fired up about. You have something to say. Yeah, here we go. So choosing a topic, this is obviously going to be the big first step. The thing here is you want to keep it really focused. So when we talk about scope in English class, it's just like, what all are you trying to do with your topic? So the example I always use is the annoying example, is climate change. So you could if you tried to write an open letter about the whole broad topic of climate change, you're probably not going to be able to say anything super interesting, right? Like you're going to have to stay too general if you're talking about the whole thing, just because it's such a big topic and there's so many different viewpoints, and we've heard 100,000 of these now. So climate change is a big thing, is not going to be useful here. However, you could, if you wanted to do a climate or weather-based topic, you could do it from the perspective of like, I mentioned bees in the other video, like what, your observations about you know, how many less bugs there are now or something like that. And, you know, maybe bring in some stuff about, you know, what you see, in terms of climate change or whatever, but it needs to come out of your experience, not so it's not like a top down topic. Like, I saw this thing about climate change in the news and therefore I'm going to write about it. Okay. Think of it as starting with, I made this observation and that connects to a problem in a real world. So start with yourself. I made this observation and that connects to a larger issue. Okay. Not larger issue connecting down, observation connecting up to larger experience. So, and you can read through this. I give you some examples, like just, yeah, if you're wanting to focus this as much as possible, honoring your perspective, using your perspective, and, you know, zoom in on it a little bit. What can you see that you want other people to be able to see? So you definitely need to think about audience here, and I'll have a whole nother video about audience more specifically later. I'll go through these concepts a little bit more, in week 5 videos. So you're going to have an explicit audience, and that's just who you write it to. So like, dear, you know, administrators of Northeast State Community College, that's kind of a specific thing. But also there's an implicit audience. So if you're writing to, you know, the administrators at Northeast State Community College, obviously that's the explicit audience, that's the dear, but maybe your implicit audience is, you know, community colleges across the nation or community college students across the nation or whatever. Like, so think, explicit audience is who is attached to your dear. So dear this person, dear this small group. But bearing in mind that you have a larger audience who, would also theoretically read this. Okay. There's some brainstorming questions there, to help you kind of get around it. And again, there will be another video about that. Your essay should have a clear thesis statement, which is just single, like one sentence that, expresses your main argument. So your big idea here. And for this assignment, you can kind of put your thesis wherever. Sometimes people like coming out with it right at the beginning. That can really work. So come out with it right at the beginning and then go into your examples and backing it up and that thing throughout. Or, it can also be really effective to start out with an example and then build up to that thesis and put the thesis at the end. So the structure here, especially for the thesis statement, is flexible, but there does need to be a clear and identifiable thesis statement. And by identifiable, I don't mean you highlight it or make it bold or something so that I can find it. Don't do that. I mean, I should be able to find it without you highlighting it for me. Okay. So make your argument, make your claim really explicit in one sentence somewhere in there. Again, we'll get into the nitty gritties of this next week. You will use exemplification in your letter. So you're right. This is coming from your perspective. You are considering an audience that is like an explicit small audience and an implicit larger audience. And in order to convince your audience to like agree with or consider your thesis, you got to bring it to life a little bit. So, I could say all day, you know, love is all there is. And that's really abstract. So think in terms of abstract and concrete here. Love is all there is. Okay, well, that could mean 500,000 different things depending on the context, right? So, if I choose instead to say love is, you know, everything, for example, and then I get to start in talking about some little thing that happened with my kids or that kind of thing. So exemplification is how you take kind of more abstract claims and make them concrete so that put skin on it so that the reader can understand it in really plain terms. Okay. So, again, there's some ways to go about that here. So instead of just, parking on campus is frustrating. Frustrating is a kind of abstract feeling, right? You can't punch frustrating. But you can tell us concretely what happens when you try to park. Oh, well, I had to park way back here and I was late and I did that kind of thing. How long it takes. Sometimes something went wrong, right? Did you accidentally get into a wreck because the parking spaces are too small? That kind of stuff. So, exemplification, and there'll be a video for this as well, goes into bringing that abstract idea, so bringing that kind of thesis into really concrete terms based on your perspective or your point of view or your experience. Okay. So for the structure for this, open letters are not, it's not a traditional essay. You should not structure this like a traditional essay. Reading the open letters from week 4 will help here. You'll kind of see the flow of it. So obviously arrange this in paragraphs. You should never submit something to an English class that is just one page of nonstop writing. Breaking into paragraphs is an excellent way to be persuasive as well, because what it does is it visually like breaks the page so that that first sentence of a paragraph gets highlighted or the last sentence gets highlighted, that kind of thing. So be savvy about how you break up your paragraphs, because those are also they can really put a pin in certain things like your stronger claims or whatever. So this should be organized in some way. You've got to introduce the idea, you got to build the context, develop it through examples and that kind of thing. So just consider your structure. Your structure may flow out of you in a natural way. That might be totally fine. Or others of you, if you're like me, you might start writing this and then by the time you've turned it in, you've completely flip-flopped things around, whatever. So the structure here, when you first sit down to write something, a big tip is don't put pressure on yourself to put it in order when you first write it. Your brain doesn't necessarily work like that, right? Like, so the idea is to get your ideas in order before you turn it in and organize things in a way that are persuasive and clear and all that to your reader. But we don't necessarily think like that. Our brain like pinballs around like boom, boom, boom. So when you start writing, it might be good to just get your ideas out onto the page, like what do you think of when you think of your topic? What have you experienced when you think of this topic? What do you really have to say about this topic? Don't expect the structure to come out of you in order. The structure is something that is unnatural to the brain, but that we impose upon later. So if this just comes out of you in order, great. But if not, just be considerate of how you tack things together. Okay. I have a few things to help you get started. If you get stuck and you're not sure about anything, please let me know. I'm more than happy to help you brainstorm. Another thing I want to say about this is there's some stuff that's been done to death. We live in a horrifically like non-functioningly polarized society where everyone feels like they need to have a take about everything. And that's just not reasonable, right? So again, don't take on something that's been beat to death already on the news, right? So don't end up saying anything hateful. That's important. You don't want to think about drawing attention to a problem and offering a call to action or a solution and not just trying to rip someone a new one. Okay. Think about it like that. If you have some issue that you are thinking about writing about, and this just makes you want to get up on your soapbox and preach, and you have a million things to say about it, that may not actually be the best topic for this. The best topic for this is one that you're going to be able to be thoughtful about, that you're going to be able to bring in your own very specific experience about. So we have a lot of people, people have these big opinions about gun control and abortion and, all these really hot button political issues. That's probably not going to be your best open letter. All that stuff has already been said. There's all sorts of yelling and shouting. And so the tendency there is just going to kind of be to parrot the yelling and shouting that's on TV or that's, on social media and in the news, that kind of thing. Think about something that you can be thoughtful about, not just something that you can rage about. All right. And it should be something that pertains to your existence. So if you're not someone who has female anatomy, like, dude, don't do abortion, maybe, right? If you're not a gun owner, don't do guns. Or if you're not, if you don't have some stake in something and you don't have any clear examples that you can use and experience. And if you feel like you're just going to go off, let's make it more thoughtful than that. Make it more interesting. Okay. We don't just want to be yelling like on the news. Okay. So yeah, keep it small. Think about your focus. Think about something that you could see differently from other people, not just some big national topic that you want to yell about. Okay. And I don't say that to like shut you down or I don't want to hear about it. I say that because it's just not going to end up as good. Okay. So really zoom in on your own experience. Try to be thoughtful about this. Zoom in on something that you can include a concrete example, maybe from your life about, and that's going to be way more powerful than your perspective on some big thing in the news that you don't have any actual stake in day to day. Okay. So have fun with this one. People come up with the coolest stuff. So I'm excited to read these as well. If you have any questions or you want to run a topic by me because you're like, well, I do want to write about gun control, let me know. I'm more than happy to help you or to help guide you in a direction that is going to be functional for this and, not keep you too yelly or vague or general or that kind of thing. All right, cool. Have fun with this one. Talk to you later.